Agriculture offers a proven, practical way to transform our soil, our farms, our food, and our climate. Whether you're a farmer, a rancher, an educator, a gardener, or just a friend of the earth, now you can learn those principles and practices directly from the world's preeminent regenerative farming and ranching experts. Regeneration is just one click away.
Welcome everyone to this evening's webinar from Understanding Ag. We are super privileged this evening to have back with us again Sara Keough. Sara has already done a couple of outstanding webinars for us before and is also in the middle of a blog series that you can read on our Understanding Ag and Soil Health Academy website. So we would encourage you to read those articles if you have not done so already. This evening's webinar is Regenerating Human Health, the Soil and Human Microbiomes. Sara has been working as a nutritionist for quite a while now. She is an eco-nutritionist. She began her work in her home state of Colorado and now is a full-time practicing clinical nutritionist in the state of Maryland. Sara's work supports patients with a host of different issues and maladies, including digestive issues, autoimmune disorders, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. She has proven to be a huge advocate and proponent of nutrient-dense foods and has certainly been a wealth of information and knowledge and resource to those of us at Understanding Ag, and also serves as one of our technical advisors for Understanding Ag. So Sara, welcome, and I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Alrighty, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being with us tonight. I've been super excited about this topic. You know, when I first started working on this presentation, there wasn't going to be a subtitle. It was just going to be Regenerating Human Health. And I was getting super overwhelmed because there was so much information that I wanted to put into this presentation. And so I emailed Alan and I said, you know what, I think we just need to turn this into a series, and I'll focus on, you know, different themes and different topics for each webinar. So, you know, as my schedule permits and as UA's schedule permits, you know, maybe we'll do one of these every couple months or so. And, you know, they'll send out a survey afterwards too and get some feedback from you all about what you'd like to see, you know, me include in future talks. So here we are. This is the first of the series, and I felt like it was really appropriate to talk about the microbiome for the first talk, since this is truly, you know, the foundation of our health. And I'm going to dive into that, of course, and explain how this all connects to agriculture and soil. So, you know, even within this hour presentation, you know, talking about the microbiome and all its incredibly amazing complexities, you know, within 60 minutes, it's like trying to tell you the history of the world, I guess, in a few seconds. So there's just so much within the microbiome to talk about, and the soil microbiome. And, you know, I'll do my best to cover various topics and really tie these two together so that you understand how deeply connected your microbiome is to soil, to agriculture, and how this is impacting our health. So as a healthcare practitioner, I just like to make these disclaimers that, you know, whenever I'm talking about protocols or, you know, different supplements or treatments, this is information and educational purposes only. This is not meant to be advice for you to run out and start taking certain supplements or trying protocols by yourself. So please make sure you're working with the guidance of a healthcare practitioner. So this, you know, slide right here, I actually borrowed from Dr. Robert Martindale. I highly recommend everybody look up this talk when you have a chance and save this for later. It's called Inflammation: Is the Gut the Driving Force of Systemic Inflammation? And I was, really intrigued by this graph that he presented from a different study about the incidence of infectious disease, communicable diseases, right? Contagious diseases, and how since the 1950s, we've seen a pretty dramatic decline, again, of these communicable diseases, but within, the world of immune disorders, autoimmune diseases, and allergies and asthma, we are seeing a tremendous rise in these conditions over the past decades. With the exception of this last year, right, with what's happened with the pandemic, by and large, we're seeing a pretty dramatic decrease in all these different contagious diseases. So, this sort of begs the question of what's going on here, right? We've done a really good job with controlling infectious diseases, but is it possible that in our efforts to eradicate and destroy pathogens, that we've created a lot of problems for our microbiome? And we may have. So we're going to dive into all those different topics around what is impacting our microbiome in negative ways. What is our microbiome? What does it do for us? And what do we do for it? And how is it connected to soil? But I think we have to just kind of keep this in mind, that whatever it is it's causing these really disastrous impacts to our microbiome is driving a lot of chronic disease related to inflammation. And this graph is only showing you autoimmune disorders, okay, and asthma and allergies, that kind of thing. But look up the stats for obesity, heart disease, obesity, cancer, all those different things. You're going to see the same type of rise. And it's still very sad to hear that heart disease is the leading cause of death in this country. Every 36 seconds, there's a death related to heart disease. That's 655,000 people that die annually due to heart disease alone. So, these diseases are driven by chronic inflammation. So we really got to get to the root cause of what's driving this inflammation. And a lot of this does involve the microbiome. And I would say that easily half or more of my patients have one or more different autoimmune disorders. And so this is becoming very, very common. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, celiac, Crohn's, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, eczema. These are all autoimmune disorders. This is a dysfunctional immune system. Okay, and so this is related to what's happening, again, to our microbiome. And I find that when I help my patients work on restoring their microbiome, then, through different ways, kind of rewilding, rebalancing, regenerating this, I see some improvements, in their autoimmune disorders. So, what we're doing to our soil is also impacting this as well. And we're going to talk more about that. So again, before I dive into what the microbiome is and what it's all about, just want to talk some more about some of these root causes of a disrupted microbiome. This is actually another study that Dr. Martindale presented as well. And I've seen this in a few other presentations on the microbiome. And when we talk about a disrupted microbiome, we call that really dysbiosis is the medical term for that. So, there's a number of things. Genetics can impact our microbiome. Everybody has their genetic weak links. Lifestyle, diet, stress, sleep, of course, that has a huge impact on the microbiome as well. Something I often say, to my patients is that genetic loads the gun, but it is environment that really pulls the trigger. So, when we have these different environmental factors like our lifestyle, the early colonization of our gut is extremely important, of our entire microbiome, not just the gut. We're seeing a huge rise in C-section births, and that's a problem, and unfortunately sometimes that's necessary, but without being born vaginally, we're not inoculated with our mother's microbiome. And so this is causing a lot of dysbiosis as well. Different medical practices, vaccinations, antibiotics, hyperhygiene, you know, just over sterilizing our environments is a huge problem. So it is all driving this dysbiosis. And, you know, I would even say that poor soil should have been added to this, you know. So unhealthy agricultural practices, the overuse of pesticides, antibiotics with livestock, again, is driving a lot of dysbiosis. What you see here when they refer to disease and health and how dysbiosis is leading to these different types of T cells. So when we have immature immune cells, these T cells grow up into different T cells, okay, and they're sort of adult stages. And when we have T cells that are going down the T1, T2, T17 pathways, this is related to autoimmunity and asthma and allergies. And we want Treg cells. This is a balanced immune system, okay? So what is the microbiome? We've all heard about the microbiome, right? And unfortunately, sometimes when we say microbiome, and I make the mistake of doing this too, it kind of becomes synonymous with the gut. And it's not just the gut, you know, that has a microbiome, right? It's everywhere. It's all throughout our body. But, you know, we ourselves are 100 trillion human cells that make up our bodies. And there's about 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells in and on your body. And it's not just bacteria, it's fungal species, it's different viruses. So we're just like this amazingly complex jungle of creatures, and they're all communicating together, and they're communicating with our cells. And so, you know, this is incredibly important to understand that there's all these different symbiotic relationships between these organisms, and that's what helps to keep us healthy. But so again, it's the microbiome is just not isolated to the gut. We have an oral and respiratory microbiome with hundreds of different species. The reproductive tract has its separate microbiome. Well, I would say separate, different species, not separate. They're all connected. So we find that there's various different species throughout different microbiomes, okay? The skin microbiome has about 1,000 different species. And in the gut, you know, throughout the GI tract, there's a few species within the stomach, but they're largely within the colon and some in the small bowel. I've heard some people say before that the small bowel is like a sterile environment, which is not totally true. We do have some species within the small bowel, but the majority of them are within the colon. It's kind of like our fermentation factory. So that is the largest concentration of all these organisms within the bodies, is definitely within the gut. So what are these microbes doing in our bodies? You know, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive super deep into this, but, you know, I highly recommend you look up some talks from Keough Kirshner. Been a big fan of his work for years, and his company is Microbiome Labs. You guys have probably seen me use this diagram before in some of my talks. And he will go into great detail about what is happening with all of this crosstalk that's going on between microbes and fungi, and, you know, even the viral connection, and how this is so critically important for the immune system to function properly, okay? And I'm going to come back to this diagram, but what I just want you to kind of see right now is that, you know, we have the epithelial lining, which is the lining of the small intestines, along with mucosal cells. And they recognize and interact with select bacterial species that contribute, again, to the proper function of our immune system. And these microbes actually produce metabolites that not only help the gut extract nutrients from the food, but can also influence inflammation in the body. Okay, and when we have a lot of damage going on, this lining and this mucosal tissue becomes degraded, it does set off a lot of inflammation. And, you know, gut microbes help us to digest our food. They synthesize different nutrients like vitamin K2, different B vitamins. But there's a lot going on here, okay? And it's so important that we nourish this whole system to keep ourselves healthy. And again, we'll come back to this. So, you know, how do we figure out what a healthy gut is anymore? We can't really look at industrialized nations because we've been bombarded with so much. And, we really have to kind of look at other parts of the world, which is tricky because we're not going to have the same microbial species that people in other continents do, right? But it is interesting to look at the research done on some of these contemporary hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadzas of Tanzania. And just looking at something like this, these Wiggum plots, which is kind of like almost like a three-dimensional view of like how you plot some of the bacteria in their entire microbiome, you can see there's a lot more complexity here, right? And I'm going to talk about this whole concept more of diversity and how extremely important it is to have a lot of diversity within our microbiomes, what that means for our health. But, look at this microbiome of the Hadza compared to us here in the US. Pretty striking difference, right? So we can also look to centenarians throughout the world, long-lived people that are seemingly healthy. So we can also kind of assess their gut microbiomes and see how that compares and use that as a basis to sort of determine what is a healthy gut. But, we have to really, again, come back to this whole question of where have all these microbes gone? What's going on? What's really contributing to this huge difference that we're seeing between our microbiomes and, these hunter-gatherer groups. So, again, some of the things I mentioned earlier, I just want to expand on, sedentary lifestyle definitely impacts the gut. Immunizations, refrigeration of food. So around 1927 or so, we started to refrigerate our food. And this meant that there was less fermented foods because traditionally the way we preserved foods was through fermentation processes. So, fermenting foods, that's how we get a lot of microbes into our bodies as well. Sanitation and excessive hygiene. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later when I go into how to sort of rewild your microbiome. I'd be willing to bet that over this last year, with, again, unfortunately, everything that's happened with COVID, I've seen hand sanitizers everywhere, right? Everyone's been using them and washing hands excessively. So can't help but wonder, what is that doing to the rest of our microbiome? And in our efforts to stay safe from a contagion, we're still impacting some of our beneficial microbes. Just living in urban cities, though, we're exposed to more toxins. There's no soil or natural areas. Of course, dietary changes, more processed food, that's just going to have a pretty dramatic impact on our microbiome. I mentioned the C-sections versus vaginal births. Again, as we pass through our mother's canal, we are inoculated with so many beneficial microorganisms. It's crucially important. Baby formula, a few decades ago, we stopped really encouraging breastfeeding, and now, I think it's more coming back around now, and this knowledge of how important breast milk is. There's a lot of microbes within the breast milk, immunoglobulins that support the immune system. But we're almost seeing like another, a mass extinction of the microbiome. We've heard of all these mass extinction events throughout history, throughout our world history, but we're now seeing that with our gut, and it's very alarming. So where, again, have these microbes gone? Well, the biggest thing I would say too is antibiotics. I gave it its whole, separate slide because this is probably one of the #1 causes as to why we've wiped out a lot of our beneficial species. I think it's super concerning, that agriculture uses 4 times more antibiotics than human medicine. And this is primarily within, industrial operations, right? Factory farms, where they're, using antibiotics to accelerate growth of their livestock and, of course, avoid sickness. I love what Ray Archuleta always says, antibiotics are anti-life, antibiotic. With a single dose of broad spectrum antibiotics, that's going to wipe out a lot of your normal flora. That was a quote from Dr. Robert Martindale that I mentioned to you in the first slide. So even as a medical doctor, he acknowledges, he says in, that talk, I know that, when I have to give someone an antibiotic, he's a surgeon. So before surgery, when I have to give someone an antibiotic or, post-surgery, I know that I'm taking out some of their normal flora. But, again, highly recommend you go back and listen to his talk. It's always so refreshing to hear a medical doctor talking about the microbiome and how critically important it is for our health and its connection to all the inflammation. He also mentioned, though, in that talk, it can take a year, for some species to recover, or some may never recover at all. And of course, this book is by Martin Blaser is fantastic about this whole phenomenon of these modern plagues being fueled by antibiotic misuse and abuse. So why do we want diversity in the gut? If you guys know about how natural ecosystems work, and I know all you regenerative farmers understand this concept, but within any ecosystem that's going to have robust health, we want a lot of diversity, okay? Diversity of all kinds, in the soil, we want different bird species, different plant species, animals, and this is no different in the gut. We want a lot of diversity. This was a really fascinating study released last year. Health and disease markers correlate with gut microbiome composition across thousands of people. So it's a huge study, guys. There's 3,400 people that they looked at their gut microbiota, and approximately 150 different markers connected to health. It's probably hard to see this graph unless you have a big screen right now, but you can go in and look at this study. But essentially what you're seeing here, I'm gonna look at my other monitor so I can explain. Everything above this line, the higher these values are, there's an inverse relationship to microbiome diversity. So the higher these values are, the worse the diversity was. So in other words, when we see high triglycerides or a high BMI, high body weight, high LDL small particles, that's related to heart disease and inflammation, lots of diarrhea, digestive issues, high insulin levels, etc. This is all connected to lower diversity, okay? So that's what we're seeing. That's correlated with lower diversity in the gut. There's other things here through, liver enzymes, inflammation markers, etc. And everything below this dotted line, when we see that these are high, there's a positive relationship. So essentially, if these are higher, then we see greater diversity in the gut. And these are usually things associated with health. So LDL particles was pretty high. Now there's good and bad LDL particles. I'm not going to talk about that in this discussion, maybe a future talk. But LDL particle size that's connected with good cardiovascular health, we actually see a really strong correlation with a lot of diversity in the gut. Exercise, HDL, which is often called the good cholesterol, DHA, which is a type of omega-3 fat. So again, we see these correlations between different markers of health and diversity. So we know diversity is so important in the gut. Okay, I'm trying to get my little marker here off the screen. Oh, here we go. Okay, how to get back from the other monitor. So I have a little video that I want to share. To regenerative farmers, this might not be anything new, but I've also invited a lot of my patients onto this call and invited some of my colleagues as well. So I love to just kind of introduce people to the soil microbiome with visuals. And thank you to my friend Steven Zwick. He sent me this awesome video, and I think it just perfectly explains this. But I also love to quote Nicole Masters here in her TED Talk, and remind people human comes from the word humus. So we come from soil, okay? So let's watch this video. It's about 3.5 minute video and see what's going on within the soil microbiome.
Healthy living soil is filled with a balance of fungi, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, and microarthropods. An incredible diversity of organisms make up the soil food web. From the tiniest one-cell bacteria, algae, fungi, and protozoa, to the more complex nematodes and microarthropods, to the visible earthworms, insects, and plants. We're going to zoom in 100 to 400 times magnification to check out these critters living in our soil and get a close-up look at what healthy soil looks like. First, let's take a look at bacteria. The smallest, most plentiful microbes, bacteria benefit plants by increasing nutrient availability, including nitrogen. Chemical fertilizers and pesticides limit bacterial numbers, stopping aggregates from being formed, leaving no structure in the soil. Tilling leads to bacterial dominant soil, thereby selecting for weeds. Soil that's left undisturbed has a nice balance of bacteria, fungi, with plentiful aggregates, organic matter, and soil structure. Fungi grow in long thread-like strands or hyphae in the soil. Reduced tillage allows fungi to flourish, so they can help plants take up water and nutrients, resist disease, and tolerate drought. A fungal dominant soil is usually found in woodlands and around mature trees. Incorporating fungal dominant soil in your compost or compost tea can help inoculate soils, leading to a balanced fungi-bacterial ratio, selecting for crops we want to grow. Protozoa are single-celled predators, which include flagellates, amoeba, and ciliates. They feed on bacteria, fungi, other protozoa, and organic matter, releasing plant-available nutrients. Protozoa are responsible for mineralizing nitrogen in agricultural soils. They are also a good source of food for other soil organisms and help prevent certain pathogens from establishing on plants. Like protozoa, nematodes are important in releasing nutrients in plant-available form. They help distribute bacteria and fungi through the soil by carrying microbes on their surfaces and in their digestive systems. They are useful indicators of soil quality, since nematode populations are impacted by all land management practices. They enhance soil quality by regulating the populations of other soil organisms and consuming disease-causing organisms. Microarthropods. They are fundamental to the creation of humus and the formation of soil. They contribute to a healthy soil ecology, especially helping with the decomposition of soil organic matter into a form that bacteria can consume. They contribute to nutrient cycling in the soil and also help suppress plant pests. They actually increase nitrogen in soil by digesting microbes and organic matter.
All right, so pretty cool, right? Everything you're walking around on out there is not just dirt. You know, this is living soil, and there's an ecosystem within that soil. And that's incredibly important for plants, animals, humans. And, you know, when we think about the microbiome for plants, again, it's the same thing. There's not just like a microbiome in the soil, just like we don't have just a microbiome in the gut. It's everywhere. It surrounds us. So there's an air microbiome, phyllosphere microbiome, kind of on the surface of the leaves, an endophytic microbiome within the roots and stems, seeds, pollen, rhizosphere microbiome. This is kind of like sort of equivalent to the gut, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. You know, the crosstalk that's happening between the plants and the bacteria in the soil is all happening here within the rhizosphere, really everywhere, but primarily down here in the rhizosphere, and that's all part of this soil, you know, microbiome. So I got this wonderful infographic from Christine Jones, and so her talk is there if you want to look that up, Secrets of the Soil Sociobiome. And I'm not going to dive super deep into all of these concepts around soil, because I want to get to some case studies and give you a little idea of what I do in my practice to help people with restoring their microbiome health. But, you know, I highly recommend you look into the work of David Johnson, again, Christine Jones, Chris Nichols, all these amazing people that I've learned so much about the soil from. So livestock are absolutely essential for healthy soil, okay? And again, not another topic I'm going to dive super deep into. You know, Gabe and Alan could always share more about this, but you know, we have to consider that animals are part of an ecosystem, okay? And when animals are out there grazing around, they're doing a lot more than just, you know, feeding themselves. They are contributing to that soil microbiome, and in many ways. So in a nutshell, you know, ruminant saliva actually has these substances that trigger the growth of some grasses. So this tugging action also causes the plants to release carbon compounds that we call exudates into the soil. And it's managing the grazing of animals that's critically important. So that's what we talk a lot about in understanding ag, is how to properly graze animals so you're not overgrazing and affecting the growth of these plants. But you don't want to undergraze either. So these exudates provide food for microbes, and in return, microbes give back metabolites to the plant. So that's everything that's happening here. So just wanted to zoom in a little bit on the root microbiome. This is from a talk by Anne Beakley, another amazing expert on the soil microbiome. And, you know, again, the rhizosphere, this whole, you know, area kind of surrounding the root system of the plants is very complex. We have a lot of fungal species and bacteria and so much cross communication that's happening, and the exudates that are being secreted from the plants. And this is liquid carbon. This is how, you know, one of the ways that we can kind of pull carbon, you know, out of the atmosphere and sort of into this whole system as part of these root exudates that are nourishing these bacteria. So how does this all connect to the human microbiome? This paper did a fabulous job, I think, really kind of pulling some of these concepts together. And so I wanted to share some of their infographics. This was called Healthy Soils for Healthy Plants for Healthy Humans. And, you know, I really liked this side-by-side comparison when they, you know, looked at the stomach kind of microbiota, the duodenum, which is the upper part of the small bowel, that kind of connects to the stomach. Then we have the colon, which again has, you know, high diversity and a large majority of our microbial species. And, you know, there's some analogies that we can kind of draw between, you know, the human microbiome and the soil microbiome. You know, the soil, the rhizosphere, and then again, that endosphere. And, you know, here's the endophytic microbiome within the plants. And then the rhizosphere. So again, this is kind of like in the soil with the root system, and there's all this communication that's happening, all these different relationships being formed between these organisms. So I like this infographic as well. I'm going to point out a couple things that I disagree with, but, you know, by and large, I think this is a very good diagram for helping people understand essentially that fragile health, poor health, you know, results from a fragile gut microbiome, and the use of herbicides, fertilizers, pesticides, you know, leading to a fragile plant microbiome, poor soil microbiome, right? It's going to cause some issues for us. And then conversely, if we are avoiding those things, these pesticides that are really damaging a lot of the soil microorganisms, you know, we're going to have a healthier plant and healthier soil microbiome. And we in turn are going to be healthier for that as well. Disagree with, but I'll point it out if you didn't. I definitely, you know, don't mean to pick on this author. Again, I love this paper. I think it was great, but they're a little misinformed about meat. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But, you know, they're saying essentially that a diet rich in meat leads to an unhealthy microbiome. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard that before, right? That all these studies that link high meat consumption to, you know, colorectal cancer or even other cancers. And, you know, a healthier diet keeps being correlated with low meat, but that's not necessarily true, because we have to look at the quality of that meat. And that in and of itself as a whole, kind of touch on that for a little bit here. So these two gentlemen, Fred Provenza, Stefan Van Vliet, are definitely going to be some of the heroes of the regenerative agriculture movement, especially for our regenerative farmers, because they are doing amazing research on really looking at the differences between pasture-raised animal products, conventionally raised animal products. You know, I know I've talked about this book a lot, and most of us in the regenerative agriculture field know about this, but to my patients and colleagues who've never heard of Fred, please get a copy of this book. It is absolutely incredible. You know, nourishment, what animals can teach us about rediscovering our nutritional wisdom. Fred's done an extensive amount of research on studying herbivores, and there's this whole concept of animals eating a wild diet have a lot of phytochemical richness in their meat and their fats. So they're actually doing the studies on this. Stefan is leading the way on some of the metabolomic studies to look at all these different compounds. And I've arranged for him to be with us tonight as a special guest. So he's going to appear for our Q&A and talk a little bit about his work. And UA is going to have him on next month to dive into that deeper as well. But so this paper was amazing. Health promoting phytonutrients are higher in grass-fed meat and milk. This was a meta-analysis type study where they combed through all the previous literature. And this statement right here is pretty profound. Several phytochemicals found in grass-fed meat and milk are in quantities comparable to those found in plant foods, known to have anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, and cardioprotective effects. That's huge. When I first heard Fred talking about, phytochemicals in meat, I thought phyto means plant. How are we seeing plant compounds in meat? But that is exactly what we're seeing. When animals eat a rich diet, they in turn have all these amazing phytochemicals in their meat when they're eating a really phytochemical rich diet. And that's what this infographic displays beautifully. This is also from their paper. So it's very simple. Animals fed, nothing but grain or soy, corn and soy, or leftover Halloween candy. Yes, that is what happens with a lot of leftover candy from the holidays. It gets trucked off to feedlots, really sad. We feed this kind of junk to animals. Of course, they're not going to have very rich phytonutrients, right? Not going to have hardly anything. And so this type of diet is what we want. We want a regenerative operation that feeds animals a very diverse number of plant species.
Hello, everyone. We are working to get Sara back. Please just be patient, and we hope to have her back here very shortly. Okay, everyone. We are working to get Sara back. She should be back shortly, but I do want to introduce Stefan Van Vliet, Dr. Van Vliet. He is a guest panelist tonight, and he will also be doing a webinar for us concerning his research on metabolomics or nutrient density in food on May the 28th. Dr. Van Vliet is a nutrition scientist and metabolomics expert at the Duke University School of Medicine. He earned his PhD in kinesiology and community health from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and did postdoctoral training at the Center for Human Nutrition at Washington University in the St. Louis School of Medicine. So Dr. Van Vliet, we are honored to have you with us this evening. And if you have any comments or anything that you would like to share with us until we're able to restore Sara, please do so.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to presenting to the folks of Understanding Ag in a month and a half from now. I think we have Sara back.
Oh, great, great. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
There we go. There we go. Great. All right, everybody hung on, Sara. You didn't lose anybody. So
yeah. Farm life, right? No,
that's right.
We don't got good internet connection out here. Sorry about that.
Okay, back to you, Sara.
Thanks, guys. Well, it's good timing, at least. You guys got to connect with Dr. Van Vliet for a minute. Let me get my screen back up. Okay. You guys can see that? Yep. We're good? Awesome. Alrighty. All right, where was I? All right. I think I just start getting into this slide here. I don't see it changing though. Let me see. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Is it changing? Okay, so I think we were just getting into this whole talk about the phytonutrients, all the different phytonutrients in the meats, and of course that animals are deriving from plants. So I'm super intrigued by carnivores. Okay, for those of you who aren't familiar with the carnivore diet, this is a diet that consists exclusively animal products and no plant products whatsoever. And when I first heard about carnivore diet years ago, of course I thought it was crazy and extreme, but it turns out this is pretty healing for some people that really cannot tolerate any plant foods because they have such an impaired microbiome. And so sometimes I'll use that therapeutically for people while we're working on some gut healing protocols. But I find it so intriguing that a lot of them have been reporting, you know, better digestive function and, you know, just kind of following what's going on in all the different carnivore communities. You know, they're talking about getting stool testing and their microbiome improves. And I theorize that this has a lot to do with phytonutrients, and I'd love to hear some of Stefan's thoughts on this. But, you know, there's a lot of research on this, all these different polyphenols, right, that I was just discussing, all these phytochemicals that have some fantastic benefits for the gut. So, you know, just to kind of walk you through some of these diagrams, you know, we ingest the polyphenols, you know, the healthy microbiota, you know, consume that. And then they produce these metabolites. And these have a lot of different beneficial effects through the body. They can help with inflammation. They can help with, you know, just gut health in general, the immune system, how our immune system functions. And there's over 8,000 different types of polyphenols. And, you know, that includes resveratrol and flavonoids like quercetin and, you know, capsaicinoids from chili peppers. So all these amazing different polyphenols, right, from different plant foods. But again, we're now seeing some of that in the animal meats. But, you know, the healthy microbiota also produce butyrate. If we have some time, I'll talk a little bit about butyrate. And butyrate is a short chain fatty acid, which helps the inflammation in the gut and can help improve our immune system function. So lots of really cool studies on that. Just want to include a few infographics, but polyphenols can impact the composition of the gut microbiota. Again, are independently associated with health benefits, and gut bacteria metabolize those polyphenols into the bioactive compounds that produce clinical benefits. So yeah, I think we're going to see some more interesting research too from Stefan about the gut microbiome. Polyphenols can also impact the brain. So, again, here's our bacteria. Polyphenols can sort of directly impact the brain, but then they can also become metabolized within the enterocytes. This is the lining of the small bowel, kind of similar to the other graphic that you saw. And they break down these polyphenol metabolites into neuropeptides, that help form different peptides like serotonin and dopamine, right, that have very important effects for neurologic function and mood. We know that phytochemicals can also influence the gut microbiota in how they impact obesity and different inflammatory diseases. So we're discovering all sorts of wonderful things right now about polyphenols. So I know we're, especially with the delay, losing connection, we're a little close on time, but I want to just give you a little idea of what I do in my practice and how I work with patients to kind of restore their microbiome. So one of my mission statements is regenerating health from the ground up. So quite literally, right? We're very connected to the soil, as you've been learning. And these are principles that I like to have everybody sort of keep in mind as I'm walking them through any kind of healing journey. And, just like we talk about context as one of the soil health principles in understanding ag, context is extremely important when we're thinking about how to heal the human body. So context is, where do you live? Are you in an urban area? Do you live on a farm? What are your scheduling constraints? What are your financial constraints? Because obviously that's going to dictate a lot with, what kind of foods they can purchase, right? What kind of testing they can afford. So I try to meet my patients where they're at, and I take into consideration context. I think that's extremely important. Bioindividuality is incredibly important to consider too. What was your foundation? Were you born vaginally? Were you born C-section? Were you breastfed? What about genetics? We can look at nutrigenomics and see how that might be impacting your health. Your individual biochemistry is extremely important to consider. And we'll kind of talk about all that and how it really connects to the microbiome. But, we want to be thinking about things at the foundation of our health too that affect our biochemistry, obviously sleep and detoxification and stress management. So many things we don't have time to talk about today, but those all impact the microbiome. And this is an important topic too. Optimal health is kind of our goal, not perfect health. And this is something I feel like I need to emphasize more to my patients that I don't enough because I see, I'll be working with patients for a year or more and I see so many amazing changes. And sometimes they're still a little discouraged because it's like, oh, well, I still kind of have this symptom or a little bit of that symptom. But overall, they've made significant, tremendous, amazing progress. And so at the end of the day, we are this dynamic ecosystem, right? We're always changing and we're never going to have perfect health. Okay. We're never going to have a perfect symptom-free life, right? Just earlier today, I was fighting off a little bit of migraine because I had a bad night of sleep. So, I'm not in perfect health either. Just to kind of share a little bit about my personal healing and what I've been through. I used to be very sick. I was raised on a standard American diet. So child of the 80s, right? Low fat, everything. Butter was out, margarine was in, cereal for breakfast, pancakes on the weekends. I think my parents are on this call. So mom and dad, you guys did your best, with what information we had at that time, right? But standard American diet, just total crap diet. And it impacted me so badly because I became very, very addicted to sugar. And I fought sugar addiction for about 20 years. I had a full-blown eating disorder. I was a binge eater. I became overweight. And I, hid this for a very long time. And I struggled with bulimia and anorexia and just all these crazy, crazy things that came with that. Hormonal imbalances, digestive issues. And I feel like I spent most of my life being sick until my late 20s when I started really learning more about health and nutrition. So about 10 years ago, my health really, really crashed. And when I was at my absolute worst, I mean, I couldn't get out of bed some days. And this is when I moved from Colorado to the East Coast to start my graduate school program. And, went through a lot of traumatic events on top of, this lifelong battle with sugar and binge eating. And, I just got to the point where I truly couldn't get out of bed some days. I was so damn sick and my hormones crashed. And, I found an amazing integrative doctor, and I had the support of some awesome, colleagues in my grad school program, which I'm so thankful for. And I, started this road to recovery. I never thought I was going to be free of sugar addiction. It was a drug for me. And I never thought I was going to be free of that. And I am now. Doesn't mean I'm in perfect health though. And so that's why I tell that story, because whatever happened throughout our lifetime and our foundation can impact us sometimes for, a lifetime. But, we got to do the best we can to bring our body back into balance and try to achieve an equilibrium, right? And really restore our microbiome. And I will say without an absolute doubt that working on my gut health and just my microbiome as a whole, correcting nutritional deficiencies changed my life. When you get to the point where you don't really want to live anymore because you're so sick and you're so miserable, it changes your whole perspective, right? So it gave me a whole new outlook on life and respect for our bodies, and how resilient our bodies can be and how we can heal from so much. So I have a lot of compassion for people that have struggled with their health, their whole lives. And that's, why I do what I do. To help people get well. So optimal health, not perfect health. We're always going to struggle with some things, but as long as we're working on this right here, terrain, you are an ecosystem. You are connected to an ecosystem, right? So this is what it's all about, is just focusing on that ecosystem. There's no magic pill. There's no just silver bullet approach to anything. It's always a journey. It's back to healing. So I'm going to try to zoom through some of this so we can talk to Dr. Van Vliet and get to some Q&A. But, it's hard to not talk about digestion when we're talking about the microbiome, because, again, so much of it does lie within the gut. So, helping people to restore their digestive functioning is crucial for having a healthy microbiome in general. And we got to start with upper digestion first, upper GI support. And so that is looking at the stomach, looking at, stomach acid, the liver. Is your liver making bile? Do you have a gallbladder? Is your bile thin and flowing, or is it becoming thick and viscous where you're forming gallstones and then you have to get gallbladder surgery when you have a gallbladder attack? Is your pancreas making enzymes? Are you breaking your food down well? There's so much going on up here, right, within upper digestive function. So there's a lot of amazing ways to support this. I don't have time to go into it in a lot of detail, but ginger, bitters, artichoke is a fantastic way to kind of stimulate this digestive fire. Fermented foods, all these things are amazing for supporting bile flow and pancreatic function. Apple cider vinegar, all these wonderful things, and trying to help kind of taper off some medications. PPI medications are probably some of the most damaging things, as well as antibiotics for the gut, because if we start suppressing your stomach acid, stomach acid is our first line defense against pathogens. Okay, so, we see all this research now. This is a great book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, Dr. Jonathan Wright. This is a diagram from his book. When our stomach acid starts to climb, That's not good. That affects everything downstream, right? How we digest our food and break it down. But like I said, that first line defense for protecting us against pathogens. And we see this decline, in our 30s, and it kind of keeps just dropping. So when we're dealing with things like reflux, acid reflux, and just a lot of burping and belching and bloating, in the upper abdomen, that is often low stomach acid. It sounds very counterintuitive, but if we do not have the right stomach acid level and the right pH, this valve right here can't close properly, and then we get all this reflux going on. Okay, so anyway, there's a lot of healing that we do there upstream, before we get to sort of the lower part of the digestive tract. This is a case study, 44-year-old female, with a whole host of conditions: SIBO, IBS, CELIAC, so autoimmune, joint pain, tissue swelling, allergies. I've been working with this patient for well over a year now, and she has been amazing. She's just made such great progress. She doesn't take allergy meds anymore. She can go outside. She said there were times she could never even go outside because her allergies were so incredibly severe, had to stay inside. This is a test we kind of did. This is a stool test. So that's some of the results you're seeing here. And we kind of did this after we worked on a lot of digestive healing. So I kind of wish we had something baseline to compare. But it was great because her fat digestion looked pretty good. She's synthesizing bile pretty well. So all that looked great. She always used to say too, like, I feel like I do fine with fats and meats. So she was kind of on a more carnivore diet because that just worked really well for her body. But her pancreatic elastase, super low, 128. Usually we want to see this in the 300s to 400s. So this is super low, and this is telling me she's not breaking her foods down well. It could be why we're seeing some vegetable fibers in the stool. But, I had to give her a little bit of pancreatic enzymes to kind of break down her food better. Sometimes people need pharmaceutical pancreatic enzymes, and this is pretty low. We almost needed the pharmaceuticals, but the supplemental enzymes did well. But I don't like to keep people on enzymes for super long. I like to, give them some different bitters and things like that to transition them off of the enzymes. So coming back to this infographic, there's so many things we can do to heal leaky gut, and I should probably just do a whole separate talk on that. But what you're seeing in this diagram, healthy gut on the left-hand side, this is leaky gut. You only have one cell layer that's protecting you from everything going through the gut and everything on the other side, which is your bloodstream. So you have a mucosal layer here that is home to some bacteria, and this mucosal tissue also helps with regulating the immune system. Again, there's all this crosstalk happening between the microbes and different immune system cells. There's different cells within the gut lining that help form this mucosal tissue. But anyway, antibiotics, poor diet, toxins, not just glyphosate, but thousands of different chemicals, right? Agricultural chemicals, toxins in our food, breaking down this gut lining, really degrading this mucosal tissue. And then we get all these food particles that start leaking into the bloodstream and setting off immune system reactions and inflammation. And now all of a sudden we have all these food sensitivities. And I have people that come to my practice and they're eating like chicken and broccoli, literally like 5 or less foods, because they're so reactive to everything because of what is happening in their gut. So I use a whole combination of different things, because sometimes you can't just, food alone does not heal. Food is the number one thing that you need to fix first. Of course, we need people to eat better quality food, ideally from regenerative farms, but at least organic, and get the toxins out of the diet. But I utilize a lot of different nutraceuticals to help heal this too. High dose SPMs to kind of calm down the inflammation. Those are specialized pro-mediating resolvers, like really specialized fish oil that just really targets that inflammation. Glutamine and amino acid can heal this gut lining. SBIs, which are serum-derived bovine immunoglobulins. So as the name implies, these are immunoglobulins derived from the serum of cows. It's very healing for the gut. And high dose butyrate I use as well to kind of heal that leaky gut. So microbiome imbalances, we see, you know, a lot of these different symptoms. You know, if you guys were paying attention in that video, they talked about, you know, about the soil. We see in healthy soil, there's like a certain balance you want of bacteria and fungi, right? And the human gut, we don't really want a lot of fungal species, okay? We do have fungal species, and they're actually a very important part of the immune system, like I mentioned, but when we see fungal overgrowth, this is when we have a really dysbiotic gut and a whole dysbiotic microbiome in general throughout the body. You know, candida or other yeasts that really take over the body. We start to see oral thrush, you know, that really pesky toenail fungus that just doesn't go away. That's fungus, right? That's a fungal overgrowth in the body. That is a sign of a microbiome imbalance. So, you know, we want to correct these imbalances. Lots of bacterial imbalances lead to SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. When we don't have the beneficial microbes, that's when we get fungal overgrowth. What gets rid of our beneficial microbes? All the things I talked about, right? Antibiotics, all the stress, everything, you know, over sanitization of our lives is destroying our beneficial microbes, and we have this fungus that really takes over. You know, this just leads to so much immune system dysfunction. I'm going to talk about this in more detail. You know, SIBO is a very common condition, kind of like AKA IBS. So all these symptoms of, you know, bloating is probably the hallmark symptom of SIBO, but there's a lot of symptoms associated with SIBO. There's a lot of ways to test for these microbiome imbalances. So I really love functional stool testing and organic acid testing. These two tests really complement one another. Okay, they each have their limitations, just like different soil tests, right? All you farmers know, different soil tests have certain limitations. So we kind of look at a few different things to evaluate soil health. It's same in my practice. There's a few different tests I use to really look at the whole picture of what's going on with the microbiome. But for a stool test, it's fantastic for looking at those upper GI symptoms, just like in that case study that I showed you, right? We can look at markers related to, you know, gallbladder function, looking at the enzymes, pancreatic function, short chain fatty acid production, different inflammation markers. Stool testing's superb for looking at bacterial species, but its big limitation is it cannot tell us a lot about fungal issues. You know, sorry, all you labs out there doing stool testing. I love your test, but it just doesn't give me the full picture. They culture for yeast, but I don't see it pop up. And I'm going to show you an example in a minute of what I mean by that, because it just doesn't come up on the stool test. But I do see it in organic acid testing. This is a urine test. Excellent for finding fungal overgrowth. When we talk about fungi, there's two major things we're looking at, mold and yeast. These are two different types of fungi, right? So there's pathogenic molds, pathogenic yeast that can really invade the body. It's a whole other host of things we can look at on oat testing. Big limitation with oat testing is it can't tell us a lot about upper GI function. So I don't really see those same markers, of course, that we would see within a stool test. So again, they complement each other really nicely. This is a 37-year-old female, joint pain, lifelong constipation, headaches, muscle pain, tightness, overall great diet. But we just knew there's some imbalances going on within the gut. So this it is a stool test. So these are results of a stool test looking at gut diversity. And not going to dive super deep into all these, but the main takeaways here are Shannon's index is pretty common, as far as all the research on evaluating diversity in the gut. And this is a scale of 0 to 3. This tells us a lot about diversity, species richness. And we want that really to be above 2.5. And sadly, I don't see that very often. When we do some microbiome healing though, and kind of rewilding the gut and the whole microbiome, I definitely see this number increase quite a bit. And I have had some people get over 2.5. But when people first test, it's usually quite low. And then we look at something called the Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes ratio, okay? And this ratio, we really want this to be low, below 0.9. And when it's, when it goes much higher, that usually indicates that some of these firmicutes, bacteria have taken over, and that's connected with more inflammatory conditions and immune system disorders, digestive issues, right? And increased risk for IBS, again, aka SIBO. They kind of list out some different key species that are missing within the test. So take a look at this, the fungal species. This individual came back low, like no detection of Candida and a few other fungal species that they test for. But that is not what I saw in the oat test. So this is why I run the organic acid test, the oat test, to look at these intestinal microbial markers. So this is all yeast and fungal markers that you're looking at here. So we have really off the charts numbers for Aspergillus. So several of her markers were quite high related to Aspergillus. Aspergillus is mold. So now we have to, think about some other things, context, what's going on in your home. We have to get some testing. Was it past exposure? She's moved a lot over the years. So may have been previous exposure. Arabinose is also high, and this is yeast. So this is different from mold. This is yeast, but they're both fungi. So definitely a lot of fungal overgrowth within the digestive tract. And when we see these markers, this is colonization of the body. So meaning that the fungi have taken up residence within the body. This isn't just like, spores or things that are passing through. This means the fungi have kind of taken over the microbiome. So we got to get that back into balance. I just think this is extremely important to mention for the autism community. Organic acid testing is critically important for these individuals. This was a very powerful case study, rapid complete recovery from an autism spectrum disorder after treatment of Aspergillus with antifungal drugs. So we had an individual completely in the autism spectrum, and through organic acid testing, they were able to determine they had a lot of Aspergillus colonization, and we're able to treat that over the course of several months. And this individual is still doing quite well from what I understand. So it's pretty amazing. When we look at the autism community, there's a lot of disrupted, microbiome issues going on there, a lot of dysbiosis. Mycotoxin illness is a huge problem. So when we have fungal overgrowth in the body, the fungal species themselves are disrupting immune system function, but at the same time, they're also secreting all these mycotoxins. And this is stuff your liver has to detoxify. Okay, and mycotoxins are some of the most prevalent toxins in our environment. So, this is just, when we have fungal overgrowth, I see a lot of these type of symptoms. So, that's not to say if you have blurred vision or fatigue or whatever, it's mycotoxins necessarily, right? There's so many different things that can contribute to these type of symptoms. But definitely in a lot of fibromyalgia patients, I see mycotoxin issues. We have to be thinking about the liver. So again, when we have a lot of candida, yeast overgrowth, or mold, this really impacts our liver function. And so we gotta just dig deep and do some testing to figure out if some of these symptoms could be related to fungal overgrowth. It's such a simple, easy test and relatively inexpensive compared to the other functional tests that I feel it's important to start with that to rule it out. And then we have mycotoxin illness in livestock, right? So why would that be? Well, antibiotics, right? Like I mentioned, so antibiotics are killing off a lot of the beneficial flora for all these animals, and they are seeing a whole host of conditions in their bodies because of this mycotoxin illness. So that's a huge problem. And of course, it's also in a lot of their feed. So different molds, in grains, especially corn. Corn can get very moldy. So just to kind of quickly go through some of this, oxalates, another big problem related to fungal overgrowth. Fungi produce oxalates, okay? And oxalates
can form within different soft tissues of the body. They're sort of get trapped in different tissues of the body. And this leads to joint pain, kidney stones, fibrocystic breasts. It disrupts mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are little energy factories of our cells, and can also interfere with detox, can create a lot of muscle pain and fibromyalgia. So I like to rule this out as well, and we can see that on an oat test how high oxalates are. This is, pretty rare, but this can happen too. Oxalate crystals can actually form in the heart. I've read that they can also form in the brain, but if you see them under a microscope, they're very jagged, so very, very uncomfortable, when these are forming in the body. So gut healing, again, a gut healing protocol is something that's going to support upper GI function and help work on healing leaky gut. And we got to get just the whole microbiome back in balance. We got to reduce fungal overgrowth. That is mission number one, is to really just get this fungal issues under control. There's a lot of amazing natural antifungal remedies. Pharmaceuticals, though, can be very helpful. If someone is in just massive fungal overload, pharmaceuticals might be considered. But, again, you have to be careful too with some of these natural antifungals. And this is where, again, going back to my disclaimer, just word of caution, don't run out and just start taking a bunch of oregano and, oregano oil and caprylic acid and just loading up on these things, especially when you do that as a monotherapy, just using one of these at a time very powerfully, because that can actually make things worse for the rest of your microbiome. Okay, so, usually want to go low and slow and start really gentle with some of these things. But we want to introduce the beneficial native bacteria to the gut again. And there's so many different probiotics that I use. But I like to use probiotics that have a lot of clinical research behind them. We want bifido species, we want lacto species, because these are oxalate degraders. They can help break down those oxalates. I'm a big fan of a lot of soil-based organisms as well, different probiotics that utilize soil-based organisms. So low sugar diet, low carb diet, got to stop feeding the fungi. That's huge. Sometimes, being careful of oxalates, it can be helpful too. If I know someone's super high in oxalates, might temporarily just have them kind of titrate down in their oxalate. Spinach has tons and tons of oxalates. Lots of plant foods. B6, calcium, magnesium can help reduce oxalates as well. So this was the same case from earlier, the patient that I've been working with for over a year, did an oats test on her as well. And it was very interesting that she had high oxalates on a carnivore diet. So like I mentioned, oxalates primarily come from certain plant foods, certain vegetables, but she had a lot of oxalates. So where is this coming from if she's not eating those? So this is obviously the fungal overgrowth, right, that she has. So, I would say that bone broth and we got to be careful with that. Bone broth can sometimes, there's an amino acid that can convert to making oxalates. So we have to be careful also with collagen and bone broth, because that can sometimes contribute to oxalates too. This is that same patient. This is her yeast and fungal markers. I can't remember if I put her stool test in here. It might be on the next slide. But again, it was the same situation as the 37-year-old patient, in that her stool test did not show any yeast, but it did show up some markers here for yeast. Her ravenose was a little high as well, kind of elevated, but no mold, thankfully. So this is this is normal. This is what we want to see. All these mold markers really, really on the low end. It's that same patient. These are some markers from her stool test. Inflammation markers. This is quite rare to see inflammation markers this low. So I think with a lot of the gut healing that we did, it really helped to reduce all her inflammation. Short chain fatty acids. Again, don't have time to talk about those today. Got a few more slides left and then I'm done here, guys. Same patient, again, looking at her, this is her stool test. So the 44-year-old female with SIBO, low species diversity, Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes ratio, pretty high. So this just tells me we have a lot of imbalances within the bacterial species. So she has some fungal issues and some bacterial issues. This is totally common with SIBO. This is what we see is these imbalances. And she has some pretty severe imbalances here with specific species of bacteria related to intestinal permeability. And, Akkermansia is immensely important as one of those sort of native keystone species of the gut, because it helps form that mucosal tissue in the gut. So again, all the bacteria connected with SIBO, she has a lot of imbalances there, not surprising. All right, so last few slides, we're going to talk about rewilding the microbiomes. This is my favorite topic. We need to get the heck outdoors. This is such a sad statistic. This is from 2017. Over half of American adults report spending 5 hours or fewer outside in nature each week. That's terrible, right? And I'm guilty of this as well. So, we really need to get outside. There's some days where I'm just like in here all day researching on my computer and I'm just like, God, get outside. What is wrong with you? So this is where we need to start. We need to get out into nature. Farmers, not a problem for you, right? You're outside all day, for better or worse, right? You're exposed to all the elements. Whereas everyone else, we can be safe indoors, but that's to the detriment of our microbiomes. So rewild your microbiome. I have a few slides on this here, but walking barefoot, if you're fortunate to live, near the beach, walk, or a lake even, walk around barefoot, get some good grounding, get connected to the earth's energy, and get some good microbes. Get in the soil. Start a garden at home or a community garden, volunteer on a farm. Just get out into the woods, get out into nature in any way that you can, and incorporate fermented foods into your diet. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to talk about fermented foods, but big bonus if you can ferment wild foraged foods, and we'll talk about that. But get your babies out outside too. Let them be in the grass for a little bit. This is how you help them to develop a healthy immune system. This is so extremely important. And forest bathing is very cool. This is a great article here. But in wild areas, we breathe in beneficial bacteria, plant-derived essential oils, negatively charged ions, fewer pollutants. So just being out in the woods, just sit and meditate, and get connected to nature and get your microbiome rewild. Bring the outdoors inside. So pets are fantastic. If you can get your pets outside, even better, right? Because they're tracking in all those different microbes. Plants, sometimes I like to put plants outside and then bring them back in. And that is a great way to just try to bring a little bit of nature inside, and plants can help clean the air within the home as well. Compost soil entry mats. So I got this actually from Joel Saladin. He wrote a really interesting article called Sell the Soil. And he gave his sort of interpretation or summary of the Wall Street Journal article called The Modern Life is Messing with Our Microbiomes. And in that Wall Street Journal article, they talked about a Finnish study in which they basically inoculated different doormats with compost, and had the improvements that they saw with allergies in children. So really, really cool, study there on how we can rewild our home, to bring nature, indoors. And, for crying out loud, don't take your shoes off when you come into the house. I know that's contradicts what our parents would say, right? Take your shoes off. Don't take your shoes off. Walk around, after you come outside. I mean, granted, if you got a bunch of mud and snow and whatever, right? Take your shoes off. But I love hanging out with farmers, when I go to their homes, they're walking around their house in their farm boots sometimes and just tracking dirt everywhere, and dogs are running around, and, people that are, super hygiene freaks would probably be terrified to be in an environment like that. But we don't live in a sterile world, okay? we have been living with mold and Lyme and bacteria and viruses, and all sorts of organisms since we've been on this planet. But the reason we're becoming so susceptible to these things now, why they're becoming pathogenic for us, is because we are just not connected to nature. Okay, and then we have all these other pollutants and toxins and all that. But be aware of risks, but be smart at the same time. This, whoops, let's go back here. This is this is one of my favorite slides because I love foraging. This is my big passion and my favorite way to rewild my microbiome. And it's just something that's helped my soul, helped me, you know, mentally and emotionally to reconnect to nature, to just be out in the woods. And everything you see on this slide is edible. These are all pictures that I've taken over the years. If you've never hunted mushrooms, please don't go out and start eating mushrooms. You know, don't do that. Go find an expert group in your area that can guide you and teach you how to forage certain foods. There's I've been foraging now about 7 years, but when I first started, you know, I just joined some of these groups where these guys have been foraging for like decades, and they're just, you know, amazingly brilliant with helping you identify what's edible and what's not. And a lot of mushrooms have some dangerous lookalikes, so you have to be careful. And I know what some of you are thinking, you know, well, if we're dealing with so much fungal overgrowth in our microbiome, you know, should we be eating mushrooms? You know, there's a very big difference between pathogenic yeast and pathogenic molds and edible mushrooms that we cook or ferment and whatnot. So, but there's some debate about this. If someone's in a lot of major fungal overload in their body, I probably am not going to have them eat a lot of mushrooms because there might still be some cross reactivity there with different proteins in mushrooms that could set off the immune system. Anyway, rewild your microbiome in any way that you can. This is just so immensely important, guys. We are not going to restore our microbiome health by sitting in our triple HEPA filtered homes, you know, slathering on endless amounts of hand sanitizer and washing our hands a million times a day and never going outside. It's just, we're not going to fix our microbiomes that way. We have to reconnect with nature. It is so vitally important. And again, I'm yelling at myself with that too, because I need to get off this computer sometimes and go outside. Last slide. Those of you who've seen my talks before, you know how much I love Wendell Berry and this beautiful quote. His book, The Unsettling of America, just had such a huge impact on me for my life, my career, and just, you know, how I view this world and my understanding of what's happened to our farming communities. So, you know, no matter how urban our life is, no matter where you are, your body lives by farming. You know, we come from the earth, we come from the soil. We're all inextricably connected, and, you know, it's just so incredibly important to understand that. Never underestimate how important you are to this world. Every single one of you watching this, you know, you don't have to be a regenerative farmer to change the world, but we are all consumers, and we all need to support our regenerative farmers to really, really change this planet. So thank you for your attention. So sorry for going over. And that's it.
Sara, thank you so very, very much. An outstanding webinar, just power packed with information that each one of us can use. So we deeply appreciate that. We do have quite a few questions, and I'm sure we'll have more pouring in. So we'll go ahead and get started. And Dr. Van Vliet, please feel free to chime in at any point. I also will be asking you intentionally to you know, chime in as well. But the first question that we have for this evening is, I heard once that doctors used to always prescribe an antifungal with antibiotics. Is this true? And if so, would this be a good thing? This question would be both for Sara and Dr. Van Vliet.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've worked in a few medical practices alongside, you know, different medical doctors of all sorts. And yeah, I've seen that where they'll sometimes give antifungals with antibiotics. I mean, more often than not, I see just antibiotics being given for all sorts of things. Even when they just suspect someone has SIBO, it's like, you know, here's an antibiotic. And then what happens is this person starts dealing with a lot of fungal overgrowth. And we call that sometimes SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And then, you know, they come back and then maybe, you know, they do a test and say, oh, okay, well, you know, or just based on symptoms, let's give you an antifungal. And yeah, so I don't, you know, those approaches could work, but the thing is you have to do at the same time, and I may have failed to mention too during my presentation, is that whenever you're doing those type of protocols, antifungals, antibacterials, you have to get the beneficial species in there as well. You run those concurrently. And I didn't always know that either in my early days of clinical work, but I know that now, and you have to really do those together, kind of like a weeding and seeding, you know, weeding out the bad guys and reseeding the gut with beneficial flora. And it's a very go low, go slow kind of process when you do that. So
Thank you.
Question.
Dr. Van Vliet, anything to add?
No, I think Sara did a great job in describing it. Yes.
Okay, next question is from Daniel, and Daniel asks, are there any scientific publications measuring inflammation with regeneratively raised animal products versus conventional?
Well, I think that's a good question for Stefan. The research is coming, right, Stefan?
Yes, I'll present on this more in the webinar on May 20th. But the short end of it, yes, there is some data to suggest that this is the case. Not a whole lot, but there's some literature out of Europe where what the researchers did was they looked at pecorino cheese, which is from sheep raised on grass-fed cheese from sheep, versus grain-fed cheese, and they showed a reduction in inflammatory markers after 12 weeks of consumption. And then in regards to meat, there has not been a lot of data. The closest is a kangaroo study out of Australia that showed that consuming kangaroo, which was foraged on native pastures, and may at least be somewhat comparable to domesticated livestock products that are grass-fed. They showed also immediately after eating versus grain-fed beef, they showed a reduction in inflammatory markers. So there is some data on that now, and we're working on this to study this in beef products that are more commonly consumed.
Yes, and as Dr. Van Vliet mentioned, he will be doing a webinar for us on Thursday, May the 20th at 7 p.m. Central, entitled Health Promoting Phytonutrients in Grass-Fed Meat and Milk. Okay, another question from Daniel is, are there any scientific publications assessing the evolution of heart disease, atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, eating omnivorously but regeneratively grown, raised versus whole food, plant-based?
I hate to make you, can you repeat the first part of that?
Yeah, so he's asking, in basically, if you're going to eat as an omnivore, so include meat in the diet, then is there research assessing the evolution of heart disease, atherosclerosis, and type 2 diabetes if you're eating as an omnivore, but eating regeneratively grown and raised meats versus eating completely plant-based?
Well, that's where things get really tricky, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of studies yet to kind of tease out all those differences in the different qualities of meat, you know, regenerative meat. And, you know, I think it's tough to say. A lot of the research that we see so far, you know, I just did another search again today, and it's like the same old story of, you know, eating meat causes cancer, causes inflammation. And we need more of that research that shows, no, when humans, at least what I see, in another presentation I'll give, in a future talk, I think I want to talk more about case studies with inflammation markers that go down, markers for heart disease improve, cholesterol improves when people actually increase meat in the diet and fats. And I have presented on that before in some previous talks I've done for some other conferences. Stefan, I think you were part of one of those. So, I think case studies like that to me are incredibly compelling as a practitioner. That's the proof's in the pudding with that. When I see that kind of outcome, when I can add in some more of those diets, those are people on omnivorous diets. So when I can add in more meat to their diet though, and they're also eating plenty of plant foods and it's all organic or regeneratively sourced, and I see improvements, that's what I need to see as a clinician. And Stefan has actually offered to, help me maybe publish some case studies in a few years as as an actual study to show this is what we see, when people do eat this way.
Yeah, and to add to that, and unfortunately, those studies don't always make the headlines. But if you, many associative studies have found that when people eat omnivorous diets that are rich in whole foods, so think of it a Mediterranean diet or a Nordic diet or a traditional American diet, then generally disease risk is similar to what you see on whole food plant-based diets. So there has been no studies really looking at regeneratively grown or raised animal foods. But if you eat a high quality diet, then generally your disease risk is similar as in regards to a whole food plant-based diet. And there's actually some studies in older adults that suggest that eating a little bit more animal foods is actually associated with increased longevity and also increased health span, because we know that older age, some of the animal-derived nutrients are particularly important, such as protein and various vitamins and minerals. So the romanticized idea of blue zones being plant-based is not really rooted in scientific literature.
Yeah.
Thank you both. The next question, and I will come to both of you for this, so Sara first and Stefan second. What is your take on the whole food plant-based movement? So in other words, I'm assuming that they mean by that, obviously, the fake meats.
So the whole food plant-based movement, so this is one of those things where I think about context and also bioindividuality and meeting my patients, my clients where they're at. There's just, some people are just always going to want a plant-based diet for spiritual, ethical reasons, right? And we got to respect that. And there's a huge difference between a whole food, eating real food that is plant-based versus these super processed plant-based meats. So I've, as Alan mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I've written a series of articles about all the health problems with plant-based meats, and we could always get into all the environmental issues that they cause, but just kind of focusing on the health issues. They're just another processed food, right? So if people are going to choose a plant-based diet, I want to help them, figure out at least, the best whole foods, how to source them as best they can, and then testing, looking at nutrigenomics, looking at what's going on in their gut microbiome, nutritional deficiencies. It's an extremely important test I look at, looking at micronutrient deficiencies, omega-3 and 6 imbalances as well. If somebody's diet, even if it's a perfect whole food, regenerative plant-based diet, you can still have a lot of deficiencies, and it may not be good for your microbiome either. So, I've tested people that are on just like plant-based diet, and I'm shocked sometimes at how low their short chain fatty acids are. They're eating loads of fiber and their short chain fatty acids are terrible. So I didn't explain this very well in my presentation, I think, but when, the microbes in our gut eat the fiber, they produce short chain fatty acids, which are some of the metabolites that have all the benefits for our immune system in the gut. So in theory, for eating a lot of fiber, we should have high short chain fatty acids, but, sometimes we don't have those butyrate producers in the gut, So anyway, you know, I just, there's ways to balance a plant-based diet if that's what you choose as your lifestyle, but.
Yeah, and let me interrupt just very quickly here and clarify, and I think you, in spite of the way that I asked the question, you did a fantastic job answering that, Sarah. But Daniel did send a note clarifying he is talking about whole plant foods, not the fake meats. Or so Stefan, in your response, just keep that in mind.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I would say if we compare it to a standard American diet, anything we can do to improve diet quality is a good thing. So in that regard, I think eating whole foods is a good thing. So I think that's definitely a positive fact. I would just argue that at least for large portions of the population, eating some whole food animal products would be even better. So I would say that's the main takeaway, because what we generally see is you see large differences in nutrient metabolism between people. So it's not to say that someone cannot be healthy on a whole food plant-based diet, but it might not work for the entire population. So and I think that's important to keep in mind. But yeah, in generally, when this means that when it's compared to a standard American diet, eating more whole food plant-based is better, but I think it can be perhaps even better if we round it off with animal foods that are also whole food based.
And very
Excellent.
nutrient dense.
Yes, exactly, and especially, and I would like to clarify, especially in vulnerable populations such as children or older adults, this is important because, for instance, a recent study that came out showed that children who are eating more of a whole food plant-based diet, they had lower inflammation than the omnivorous children, but they actually were shorter and had lower bone mineral density. So I couldn't help but wondering that if the omnivorous children ate just as healthy as the vegan children, but also ate the same amount of fruits and vegetables, or in turn, if the vegan children had some animal foods, they would probably be just as healthy, but also just as robust as their omnivorous counterparts. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Excellent. So the next question is from Nisha. Nisha asked, how do we source nutrient-dense foods?
Good question. Get to know your farmer first off. Usually the resources I give my patients are 1000 Eco Farms is an amazing resource. My very good friend Les Reitzig has, a buying club where you basically go online and shop from a bunch of different farms. Here in we call the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and Pennsylvania. She goes around throughout all those states, picks up your order, and then you go to a local drop point and pick it up. So she's already vetted out these farms to be, organic, regenerative. The other one is I don't remember the name of the website. Maybe someone can throw it in the chat. It's the Regeneration International. They have a really great map where you can do a search for a regenerative farm that's nearby. There's all sorts of farms you can just buy from online, even if they're not local, So that's one of the, those are the tools that I give my patients.
Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, you are exactly correct. You've got to know your farmer, and if at all possible, even visit some farms and see what people are actually doing. It's just immensely informative, very helpful. But this is where we have to take individual responsibility and do our own research if we're wanting to source nutrient-dense foods. And obviously, with an Understanding Ag, we're going to continue to push out information about this as well. And that leads to the next question. Where can we find you, talking about you, Sarah, and others who connect human health to soil health? So obviously on the webinar this evening, we have Sarah Keough and Dr. Stefan Van Vliet, who we're bringing to you to do just that. And we do intend to continue to bring presentations and webinars and articles like this to you that will further connect human health to soil health. That is part of the vital mission of Understanding Ag. And Dr. Van Vliet and his colleagues are doing some pivotal research right now that as they continue to push out research and peer-reviewed publications, we will certainly share that with each of you because they're going to be vital in helping you to further understand this connection. The next question is, and I'm going to ask both of you to respond to this. A few weeks back, I listened to Dr. David Johnson's webinar. He mentioned fecal transplants as a way to restore gut microbial balance. Can you speak to this treatment?
Yeah, so I've actually worked with a few patients that have had that done. And, you know, sadly, they were people that went through that procedure, and it's, you know, it worked. One woman, it didn't work at all. She had zero benefit. She even flew over to the UK just to have it done. You can have it done now in Canada. And there's a way doctors here can kind of formulate it, you know, into the capsules, poop pills. But doing an actual fecal transplant, that's not legal here yet in the US, is my understanding. So I think someone just put a resource there. Julia put a resource there into the chat. But yes, I think it can be life-changing for some people. You know, obviously I'm seeing the people that are still sick, right? That's why they're coming to see me. The people that are had success with such a procedure wouldn't be coming to see me. But yeah, I think it's amazing. And it, you know, I will say that I've been doing a lot of work and studying from Dr. Grace Liu. She runs the Gut Institute out in California, and she has a pretty amazing probiotic. So just to kind of give her a little plug there, she's actually said that she's had such amazing benefits with this probiotic that it's sometimes worked better than fecal transplants. And so far I've been using it with some of my patients and seeing really, really good results. And it's a really high dose bifido species and lactobacillus, bifidobacterium and lactobacillus species, and histamine free. Unfortunately, some probiotics cause histamine issues. So I think she has a pretty amazing product. And, you know, sometimes if you just hit high enough dose with certain probiotics, you might be able to mimic that effect of an FMT. But yeah, I don't know if Stefan has any thoughts about any of that.
Yeah, I think it's been well established, at least in animal models, but at least from what I've seen, it's a little bit mixed in humans. And as you mentioned, there's also been some yeah, I guess more adverse events, and the success has not been as great in humans. I think mostly due to yeah, our lifestyles are a lot more complicated in our genetic makeup than animals. So I think that's but it could be a viable treatment in the future as the field progresses.
Thank you. The next question is, there has been some research encompassing the role of the gut microbiome and the conversion of inactive vitamin D to its active form. Any thoughts on the interconnection, especially in lieu of the number of Americans who have low vitamin D and likely have gut dysbiosis?
Yeah, I mean, vitamin D is incredibly important to the immune system. And I can't really speak to all the very specifics of, you know, the biochemistry or what happens on a, you know, on the metabolomics level. Maybe Stefan can talk about that and how vitamin D impacts the gut microbiome. But there's definitely some research on, you know, vitamin D supplementation and how that impacts the gut. But as far as the role of gut microbiome in the conversion of inactive vitamin D to its active form, I mean, it's primarily within, you know, the liver, the kidneys, you know, that we need those working well to make that conversion from how we get vitamin D from the sun. Unless I'm missing a step there, Stefan.
Yeah, no, there's definitely also more novel evidence to suggest that our bacteria in our gut can actually also convert vitamin D, dietary vitamin D, to its active form. And recent work also suggests that having greater alpha and beta diversity is associated with higher vitamin D status, and so yeah, the gut bacteria are definitely capable of processing and activating vitamin D, and vitamin D. Low vitamin D also increases gut permeability. So as you, for example, what can be called leaky gut, and heightens immune activity. So there's definitely novel evidence to suggest that low vitamin D levels can play a role in gut dysbiosis, and that higher vitamin D levels can also improve the gut microbiome.
I have a quick question for you. Are they seeing correlation, or are they seeing an actual, have they isolated a mechanism by which
there's mechanistic data from more in vitro work, so that's in the cell lines and in animal work. So there's definitely mechanistic evidence to back up the human data.
Very cool.
Excellent. The next question is, what interventions, such as testing and treatment, do you give clients with chronic illness who eat regeneratively produced whole foods, but aren't metabolizing or assimilating nutrients and therefore not getting enough benefit?
That's where gut healing and microbiome rebalancing and rewilding is crucial, right? Because this is where, unfortunately, like I said in the presentation, food alone isn't going to heal us in some cases. In some cases it does. You know, some people change their diet and, you know, off they go. They're doing amazing. But, you know, some people are just, you know, there's just a lot more complicated things going on when we consider how damaged and how badly impaired some people's microbiomes are, or just their level of leaky gut or their toxin load. I think just starting with the gut is always the foundation. So, you know, organic acid testing is something I've come to prioritize more so in my practice recently. And I've always, you know, done a lot of stool testing over the years, but I now come to see the value in those two together to really get a whole picture look at what's going on from, you know, upper GI function and down. So, you know, when I first, you know, have people come see me, they have a huge intake form, as all my patients can that are with us tonight could totally attest. It's a huge intake form. All your symptoms, you know, based on a lot of your symptomology, we can kind of see also where we need to go. You know, do we need to really look into the microbiome? And most of the time that is where we need to look at first, the gut microbiome. You know, sometimes we might need to just prioritize nutritional deficiencies, but yeah, someone has a great diet, regenerative organic diet, and they're still having a lot of issues. I still feel like there's probably something major going on within the gut.
Very good. The next question is, what are the treatments for mold and candida? Are they the same treatment for both? And what if the person has compromised detox pathways?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so, you know, mold and candida, which is a yeast, are both fungi. So we would use antifungals really to target both of those. But the only difference is, you know, if somebody has mold, obviously we have to try to look more at the environment, right? And see where they're getting the mold into their body. Was it past exposure? Is it current exposure? We have to even look at food, you know, moldy foods. Someone eating a lot of blue cheese. I used to just totally love blue cheese. And then I had issues after I sort of recovered my health after my whole health journey. I lived in a couple places where I had mold exposure and then had to go through that whole ordeal. It really threw me for a loop. So mold can be a beast, and, you know, you got to get to the root of where the mold is coming from. So that's the only difference. I mean, candida is something that's part of our digestive tract normally. You know, candida is not bad. Candida actually produces some different vitamins for us, and it does have some different immune system benefits. So candida is not this evil thing that we have to destroy, right? Just like weeds in a farming operation, a regenerative farm, they're not always a bad thing. It's just keeping it in balance with the rest of the microbiome. So antifungals are applicable for both of those. Trying to figure out the source. That's a huge part of the treatment process. And if the person has compromised detox pathways, that is extremely important. We got to open up those detox pathways big time. So Are you pooping every day? Are you sweating? Can you get to a sauna and sweat, get those toxins out? When summertime rolls around, can you lay out in the sun? You know, the sun also has beneficial effects. You know, getting that sun exposure is fabulous for increasing nitric oxide, getting blood flowing. You know, drinking plenty of water. You got to urinate out toxins. So you got to open up all those different detox pathways too. That's crucial, because the thing is, when you start killing off all the fungi, all the yeast and the mold, remember what I said about mycotoxins. Mycotoxins start coming out, and sometimes people feel a lot worse before they get better. And that's part of the whole treatment. But that's why you start low. You don't want to just put them into mycotoxin overload, you know, just bam, here's a bunch of antifungals. Now you're just like in toxic overload and you feel awful. And then what you're doing is inflaming the immune system and probably even damaging the gut a little more. So you got to go low and slow, and definitely work on opening up the detox pathways. And binders. Binders are amazing. Something simple as like activated charcoal can help pull those toxins out of the system. So I use a lot of binders, and just getting people to go to the sauna. So sauna is so helpful for that.
Stefan, anything to add?
No, I think Sarah did an excellent job. It's definitely her expertise in this regard. So good job.
Well, the only thing that I would add, Sarah, is that you keep talking about a sauna and sweating. You know, there's no need to go to a sauna. Just come see me in Mississippi and you'll sweat. No problem.
There you go. If you're in the colder Northeast like me, you just thought of it. Go to the South.
That's what I always tell Gabe Brown. Just come see me.
There you go.
All right. So the next question is, what is a rough time estimate for how long it takes to detox from mycotoxins, oxalates, and other fungal problems?
Oh, very good question, Ms. Ashley. It's my dear friend Ashley Armstrong. So that is, you know, it varies. Okay, it's going to vary for everybody. If you, what I like to do is retest people. Usually in about 2 to 3 months, you can do what's called a MOAT test. So not a full oat test. You can just do the microbial organic acid portion where you're just looking at those fungal markers in just a few months, and you can see progress. Usually I like to complete at least a couple cycles. So you would do like, you know, like maybe 3 weeks of kind of like antifungal treatments, getting in also the beneficial bacteria as well. Maybe take a week off, kind of cycle through those different things. Do 2 cycles of that, and then retest and see where they're at. Look at symptoms, reevaluate symptoms. So that is absolutely going to vary. Some people can take months and months and months and months, you know, because they're just slow detoxers. Again, you got to look at certain, you know, detox issues. Some people have certain genetics where they just detox really, really poorly. And, you know, or maybe their liver is just super compromised because it's just been like years of mycotoxin and other toxin overload. So yeah, that's really going to vary. I mean, some people improve pretty quickly, you know, in a few months, and some people, they just need a lot more time. And compliance is huge. You know, unfortunately, some people have a hard time with being compliant, and it's a lot of supplements sometimes to take and a lot of big changes. But people that are super compliant, I mean, they usually get really amazing results. You know, sometimes in a few weeks, they feel a lot better. So retesting is critical.
Very good. This next question is for both of you. If you have read this book or are familiar with it, and it is, what is your opinion of the book, Eat Dirt?
Go ahead, Stefan. I sadly haven't read it yet.
No, I must admit I've heard of the book, but I haven't read it yet. But to speak on it more broadly, as Sarah also highlighted, and the book is about exposing yourself to dirt, I think, and not be have a good balance between being hygienic or and overly hygienic, right?
Yeah.
So we do want to ingest at least microbes from our environment, which can be I wouldn't say eat a piece of dirt directly, but maybe as a farmer you can, if you know your soil's healthy, you can do that. But it is exposing yourself to microbes outside, and it can be by being out in the dirt, being out in nature, and also making sure that eat foods grown in healthy soils. So.
Yeah. Dr. Josh Axe wrote that book, and he is just a fantastic wealth of information. So you go on his website and look up various topics. He has a lot of great tips and education. But yeah, I mean, I love that idea of just not really like. Again, we got to stop with the hyperhygiene stuff and washing everything to death and like scrubbing off every last dirt particle, eat some dirty food, just pick it out of the garden and try to wash off, the grit. You don't want gritty food either, but, try to get some of those good organisms, those good soil organisms. There is one little caveat too, I just want to say, when it comes to all this stuff about rewilding the microbiome and getting yourself exposed to things, people that are really, really compromised, right? Really, really severely immune system compromised. Those are people that do have to be a little careful, right? Because there are some pathogens too in the soil and in the environment. And I don't want to just like throw them out in the woods and, have fun foraging, because they could really just have major issues with their immune system and inflammation just going through the roof. So you have to really, work on getting them to the point where they can even tolerate things in the natural environment again. So just want to put that out there as a word of caution too. I understand some people are very compromised and it's not easy to expose yourself to all the dirt.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question, I like this question from Willie, and it's: in a soil system, we want to have a higher fungal to bacteria ratio. Whereas in the gut, we are concerned about a high fungal to bacteria ratio. Why the anomaly?
Oh, okay. So let me clarify something. In the F to B ratio is actually not fungal to bacteria. So sorry if that was a little confusing. It didn't quite say that in the test results. Those are two different phylum of bacteria. So Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes. And so, in this, Stefan, I would love to hear your take on this too, because it's so freaking confusing. Because when we look at the microbiomes within a lot of industrialized nations, we see that generally healthier people have a lower FB ratio. Okay, those two different bacteria phylum. But then, there's all the research on the Hadsas, those hunter-gatherer groups in Africa, and they have this crazy high Firmicutes, kind of like, whoa, we weren't expecting that. So I'm really curious to hear your take on that. I mean, I've heard some of, I think it's Jeffrey Leach's talks and, the Human Microbiome Project and all the research they do. And it's just so confusing, to make sense now of like, what is healthy? Do we actually, does that FB ratio really matter that much?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Sarah. And I must say, I don't think we exactly, I would be lying if I say we exactly know what a healthy gut microbiome is. Because as you mentioned, there's definitely anomalies, especially in industrial nations where people with maybe not having as much diversity are still very metabolically healthy. And even in some traditional populations that are still metabolically healthy, the Hadza indeed you see a lot of diversity, but there's also other populations where you maybe do not see it as much diversity, but they also do not have the chronic metabolic disease. So at this point, I think it's hard to truly say what is a healthy gut microbiome.
Yeah.
Next question.
Generally, diversity is a good thing, though. I would say that, but
yeah.
Yes, and I would agree as well. The next question is from Monica. How does eating food cooked or heated in a microwave affect our microbiome?
Oh boy. So, well, I don't know. I mean, every great once in a while, I'm guilty of nuking my food when I'm at my boyfriend's house. We're too lazy to use the oven. But no, I don't think that's a good way to heat our food. And I think, of course, that's probably going to kill off, a lot of the bacteria. But yeah, how different is that from cooking it on the stovetop? I mean, you're still exposing bacteria to the heat and you're going to destroy them. There's other controversies with exposing your food to just the radiation from the microwave, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, there's some loss of certain microbiota, that is definitely the case. But on the other hand, in the case, I don't think heating per se is a bad thing, because it makes many foods more digestible, right? And a lot of the bacteria are also produced from having bioavailable nutrients, such as starch or fiber. So I wouldn't say that eating food cooked per se is a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, and that's why we are humans, because we figured out how to cook our food and access bioavailable nutrients that way. Also, in terms of the microwaving, I mean, you do lose some. Mainly been studied in the case of vitamins and minerals, but I would say it is perhaps not as bad as it sometimes is made out to be. So if you're in a rush and you need to microwave your food in the office, it's not like you're totally depleting the nutrients of that. Especially, there's been some more work done in phytonutrients with microwaving, and in some cases, depending on the phytonutrients, and the same with cooking, I must say. You actually increase the bioavailability, which can be done with cooking, and in the microwave, it might actually also see some beneficial effects with increasing certain phytonutrients while decreasing others. So,
yeah, I was sort of misunderstanding the question. I was thinking she was asking the difference between just cooked on the stovetop versus microwave. But yeah, I mean, I try to have a balance, like have a lot of cooked food, have some raw foods. You're going to get enzymes from a lot of plant foods, when you don't cook them. So, generally, I just feel like in the winter, I probably do a lot more cooked foods. That's where context is really important, right? Where you live, during the spring and summer months, I might have a lot more raw kind of fresh foods. But yeah, cooking certain foods can absolutely, like Stefan mentioned, help make certain nutrients more bioavailable. Not overcooking your meat, I think, is very important. Not just for taste and texture, but this is much better for our digestion. And I think some of those other, maybe even phytonutrients, and how fragile they are. Just some.
Yeah, the longer you cook them, you'll cook them out. And then also there's the issue talking about meat, obviously, with some of the potential carcinogens that are
right.
formed when really charring the meat, and you can reduce the burden when you consume it as part of phytochemically rich diets, particularly studying the case of marinades and herbs and things like that. But I agree that we don't want to overcook our meat, and hopefully in the future we'll figure out if increasing the phytochemical richness through having animals graze on biodiverse pastures can also maybe help with that. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, here's a good question from Willie. He asked, would the beneficial phytochemical synthesis in grass-fed beef depend on the animals feeding on grass grown that has a good connection to the mineral components in the soil through mycorrhizal fungi that are able to provide numerous nanonutrients like chromium and selenium and others that act as coenzyme components to synthesize these alkaloids? Would this explain the deficiency of these in feedlot finished cattle?
Yeah, to start with the last part of the question is the deficiency of many phytonutrients in feedlot finished cattle is simply because they're not ingesting these nutrients, because they're not consuming biodiverse fresh forage. And I think that's the main reason, because you also see it with monoculture pastures or with hay feeding, which at some cases might have to be done, but you do see that the phytonutrient content decreases. So there's a direct relationship between the phytonutrient content of the forage and the phytonutrient content that ends up in the animal foods. The direct relationship between some of the mineral content or several nanonutrients in the soil is a little bit more uncertain now, especially in the case of grass-fed beef. But there is some data to suggest that when animals graze more nutrient-rich soils, that you do see higher amounts of B vitamins in grass-fed beef. So that is well established. But I could see also to that point with synthesizing certain alkaloids. yeah, I could see a relationship between soil. It's a good point. I'm not sure if there's a lot of data on that, but the hypothesis makes sense, I would say, yes.
Excellent. The next question comes from David, and David says, eating foods that are grown in a healthy soil microbiome are critical to a healthy human microbiome. Would this be a fair statement?
Yes, David. He knows that. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, it's that simple, right? Eating foods grown in healthy soil microbiome are critical to a healthy human microbiome, and you know, healthy level of nutrients, you know, plant nutrients, and you know, just all the phytochemicals and the vitamins and minerals. So, yes.
Intuitively, it makes a lot of sense, but we are in desperate need of more scientific validation of that. So hopefully, as time wears on, we can start validating some of these things. You probably see empirically in your practice, Sarah, and you see Alan in farming systems. So
yeah, and I guess like we need a better way to understand or define what a healthy human microbiome is anymore. You know, with all the research and all the conflicting research out there, I mean, we see, like we just discussed, you know, different trends and different correlations, I guess. But yeah, even just
so how about I pose this back to you, Sarah? Do you think, have you seen people that are metabolically healthy but do not have a healthy microbiome?
Yes. Actually, okay. Yes, I do. It's not very common, but I mean, I do have one patient. He's, you know, he's in his 60s. He might be with us on the webinar tonight. You know, super fit guy. Okay, he's like Ironman triathlete kind of guy, right? You know, and lots of endurance activity. Great cholesterol panel. You know, metabolically, if we're talking about metabolically healthy, looking at glucose and A1C and, you know, all that stuff, liver, kidney function, everything looks great. Stool test was a lot of issues. We're waiting for his oat test to come back, but tons of imbalances within his microbiome and extremely high inflammation markers that were so concerning. You know, I told him, you need to go to your GI doctor and not wait, you know, for your colonoscopy next year. I think you should probably have it done a little sooner, just to rule out anything, because some of these inflammation markers were so incredibly high there. You know, we start to think of like Crohn's, you know, there's Crohn's or ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel disease. So yeah, that was, and just all sorts of imbalances too within the bacterial species. So yeah, you know, we can see people that look metabolically healthy, but there's just so much more going on within the microbiome.
Yeah, although I would imagine that it also manifested as systemic inflammation, perhaps with circulating cytokines being higher, pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Yeah, yeah. What was particularly high for him were his calprotectin. So we're talking about the stool test, his calprotectin. And I, you know, can't remember the other two that were elevated. I think he had like maybe 2 or 3 things, but the calprotectin was extremely high, like, you know, almost 500. So that's, you know, when we start to think inflammatory bowel disease. But as far as any other sort of systemic inflammation markers, I didn't see any elevation in those, which was very interesting. So, you know, he did just recently get his calprotectin checked again, and it came down quite a bit. But I've also been giving him lots of SPMs. That really are very powerful for inflammation. So, you know, and this is someone who's been on a really great diet, really, really great diet. We even did food sensitivity testing, you know, got rid of a lot of foods that were probably creating some inflammation. And the stool test came after all that, after he did a fabulous job, like, you know, cutting out certain foods and just really, really super clean diet. And so I was surprised actually to see those stool tests. But I mean, I have to say this is probably more anomalies. You know, I don't see that super, super often, but yeah, people can look metabolically healthy and have some issues in the gut.
We have another question from Nisha, and she asked, if you had a magic wand, and this will be for both of you, if you had a magic wand what would make your work easier at a macro or micro level?
Oh, wow. Oh, Nisha, I love your questions. You know, I'd have to say just better testing. The tests we have are great, but I love something Dr. Grace Lee says. She's like, we're still in the dark ages when it comes to microbiome testing, even, you know, those tests. All these tests have so many limitations. So if I had the magic wand to just to see what the issue is. Don't be sorry, I love that question. Like, no, I mean, it's like, you know, if I could just see what's really going on, you know, I could help fix it. But it's all this detective work that we have to do, and trying this and trying that, and you know, I hate to make people go through trial and error of different protocols, and sometimes we have to do that until we figure out what's going to work. So I don't know, just something that would, you know, give me more clear answers as to what's going on. So Stefan, if you want to invent some magic tests that's going to tell me everything about the microbiome and metabolic health, I would love that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's generally no easy shortcuts, huh? But yeah, magic wand in my case, more time to do more time, more research funds. So to validate some of these things and come up with ways that we can improve these tests and make these critical linkages.
Well, that's the end of our questions for the evening. I do want to thank you both very much. Sarah, thank you so much for yet another incredible webinar. And Dr. Van Vliet, we are very much looking forward to your webinar on Thursday, May the 20th. And again, the title of that is Health Promoting Phytonutrients in Grass-Fed Meat and Milk. And then we have another very interesting webinar coming up on Thursday, June the 10th by Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and it's entitled Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. So thank you everyone for being on the webinar this evening. We deeply appreciate your participation and look forward to seeing you again on May the 20th. So thanks everyone, and good evening.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.